On this episode of Mentor Sessions, we start off by chatting about the breakthrough 100K and the subsequent crash right back down. As always seems to be the case when Gary and I are just hanging out having a good time, the conversation goes in really weird directions. So at the 6-minute and 50-second mark, we briefly touch on Gary's adult film habits. You've been warned. We make some useless price predictions and just kind of enjoy riffing about the market. We talk libertarian philosophies. It seems that we really always do. And we get into a little bit on quantum computing, the little that we know, and we finish off by discussing how we need to spend more time on NOSTR.
Welcome back, everybody, to the latest episode of Mentor Sessions. It is I, Gary Mahmoud, which is my Fiat name, and I'm here with my better half, Nathan Fitzsimmons, who is much smarter and far more hardworking than I am. So it is a pleasure to be here with him. Nathan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's fantastic to be here, buddy. And I may be the smarter one. I agree. I will take that title, but I'm not the best dressed, Mr. Orange Boa. So I see we probably had a new all-time high recently, as we're still sporting that. I heard also that perhaps we had a little bit of a bake celebration going on as well, too.
Yeah, I jumped in with some friends in the Jersey City Bitcoin meetup group. I've just doxed myself. I do live in New Jersey. And no, I mean, I live in Ohio and I drive to New Jersey for the Jersey City Bitcoin meetup.
It's that important.
Yes, which is not in Jersey City. It's in Trenton, I think. And we had a little $100,000 Bitcoin cake celebration. So I had a little orange cake made with the Bitcoin logo on it. Everybody was happy. We had a nice time. The lady who made it, very nice lady. She made a couple of my kids' birthday cakes in the past. I got to say, she did it a little too much on the cream cheese frosting this time. It felt like it was more frosting than cake. But again, very nice lady. You should go to her. I'm not going to say exactly what place, but if you call me, text me privately, and I see that you're cool, I'll send you exactly where she is.
Too much icing. That sounds exactly like my son's favorite type of cake. I swear he just licks the top off. That's all he's ever doing.
Isn't that every child's favorite cake? Is there a child, like, if I see a child who gets a cupcake who eats the cake before the frosting, I'm like, are you a psycho? Like, this kid's going to grow up to be like a mass
just,
murderer.
Like, scraping it off, just wants like a muffin, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, God. Somebody watch out for this kid in 20 years.
Oh, God. And funny enough, Gary, it was only on December 4th, if I'm not mistaken, for the first time that we hit 100K. Absolutely amazing. Historic moment, a date that will live on in infamy. And all I was seeing yesterday and today is, oh my God, we've crashed to 100K. That's actually happened. We have people panicking. Oh my God, we're back down at 100K. We were, what was it, like June? We were still arguing whether or not it was going to be 50K or not. We were still floating around that range.
I know. I mean, we were up at 108 at one point, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we had an $8,000 move in a day used to freak people out. I didn't even notice until Twitter told me, and I was busy. I'm not being like, oh, I'm so much better.
Well, we were talking earlier, like how I mentioned this when I've had some Bitcoin for over 10 years now. Again, I didn't buy a lot at the beginning, but I would just kind of set it and forget it. I'd go days, weeks, months without even looking at the price. It's like, all right, it's just sitting there, let it do whatever it does. And my mentality on that has not changed. Like, I still have no intention of parting with it anytime soon. I'm completely in for the long haul. And yet somebody asked me the other day, a neighbor of mine, who I think I've mentioned here before, he asked me, how often do you check it? And I thought about it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I think in the past 6 months, I've been checking it 2-3 times a day. And I don't know why I'm doing it. It's not actionable. It could go up 50,000, go down 50,000. It's not changing my plan in any way. I don't know why I'm wasting my time checking the price.
I have a theory, and we'll see if we can nail it down. But I was kind of the reverse. When I first got in, I was checking it all the time. And now I've reached the point where, again, it's like Bitcoin Zen. It's like, I'm not looking. If I see that like Twitter or something's blowing up, then I'm a little bit curious. I might go check it out. But funny enough, on like the non-actionable side, I do the same thing with particularly like the Canadian credit and stock markets. I'll look at global markets and things as well, too. I don't own any bonds. I have no intention of owning any bonds. I don't want any dollars. I don't have stocks. I don't have bonds. All I've got is Bitcoin in my home. But I find it fascinating. It's like it's the urge to understand what's going on. And it's not even necessarily like predict, but it's almost like prepare and set expectations. Like, I want to know, and maybe it's just like in Canada, it feels like just looking at a car accident driving by. It's like, I think things are going terribly. And I can't help but stare at this and wonder how bad it's going to be. Again, nothing actionable. It changes none of my behavior. It's purely just like almost like speculative entertainment at this point. But like you, it's like today, Canadian dollar is currently sitting at 69.54 US. It is just bottoming hard here. Does it change anything that I do? No. Does it impact my day-to-day life? No. But here I am studying this yield curve shape going, okay, is this a bearish inversion or a bullish inversion? What's going on here? And but it becomes just fascination. Now, going back to Bitcoin, I think the reason that I paid so much attention to the price, I think maybe most newcomers, I guess not yourself, do, is I really wanted that validation that I was right.
We all do. I'm human. I want validation.
100%.
Sure.
And so at this point, like the reason that like I know the long-term plans and strategy, I'm trying to plant a tree for the kids, shade that I will never necessarily enjoy, right? Thank you. Plan the legacy. I've had a wonderful life. I want to make sure that they do as well too. But when it reached the price point, like when there was enough, price information there to go like, yeah, you're on the right side. You were correct. I didn't feel the need for that reassurance of checking anymore. So I'm curious, is there something about it going on now that maybe factors into Gary's ego? Is there some way that this like above 100K proves that like Gary, Mr. Been here a long time, was right all along?
No, I wish I could even say it's that complex. I think it's just ADHD with me. Like, we might have to edit this out, but I mean, I'll look at porn even if I'm not horny. Like, why am I looking at this? Like, I'm not even in the mood. I'm just like, something looking on my phone. I don't know.
The current trends in Story Arc is really improving. I enjoy the new lighting material. You can tell that the guys over at Brazer bought some new mic equipment.
Excuse me, that's Brazzers. Thank you very much.
See, I don't even know proper pronunciation.
Yeah, sure you don't. Okay. So we'll have to talk to Ben and Mike to see if this is allowed on our show or if it needs to be edited out.
We'll just leave it out. On a quick side note, I thought that was I love looking at advertisements and marketing. I think it's very fascinating. And it can be just like an interesting creative wheelhouse. And just speaking on the adult entertainment section briefly, they had one ad that I thought was absolutely brilliant. It was just two stick figures and a guy sitting at a computer, and the lady asking, "What are you looking at?" and the guy saying nothing. And then it was for Pornhub, and it said the largest archive of nothing.
I've seen that. That's funny.
That was funny. That was good.
I showed it to my lady. She left.
We all got a good chuckle out of it. Speaking of price and stuff as well, too, let me pull up Time Chain Calendar. We'll see where we're currently out, because I know that Sailor had some recent comments that I thought were interesting. Let me go over here and share the screen. Boom. All right. We are currently hanging out at block 875,465. Bitcoin is currently trading at 100,240 US, 998 sats per US dollar. We have 19.79 million in terms of supply. Fee priority right now 12 and anytime 4. That is one of the things about this current, I think I'm going to go with it. This current bull cycle that we're in, I think we're in a bull run. I think this is probably the first half of it necessarily. But the fact that fees have not spiked has been just absolutely perplexing to me. It seems like there's more purchasing power packed in transactions, but I see no indication of the classic kind of retail showing up at this point in time. And even just jumping off that, let's difficulty out quick. Oh, looks like we're looking at another difficulty adjustment. Up was the most recent one. Next one we're looking at a little bit down, currently at 176 exahashes per second. But going back to that, I was speaking with Check Unchained yesterday, James Check, and he made the case that he doesn't think retail's coming at all this cycle. Is very strong case for it, basically articulating, and I kind of agree, but I almost want to like pull it apart a little bit with you, making the argument that one, we kind of have like the realization that retail cannot move the price anymore. Like retail purchases, the smaller buyers that have no impact. It's trading, what is it, 2 trillion, above 2 trillion now.
Something like that, yeah.
We don't move markets, and the unit bias is probably really discouraging at this point. Like we just pulled it up. $1 is getting you 998 sats. Like I remember,
we're below that 1,000 mark. That's crazy.
Below that 1,000 mark, and it wasn't that long ago that you were getting 10,000 sats per dollar. Like it's it's unsettling. And I think because of the unit bias, he's right that it does make some people feel like it's unattainable. And funny enough, too, who was I speaking to? Oh, it was I forget the gentleman's name, guy from River, but I've spoken to a few people at exchanges, and there has been the conversations, at least it's something that they're talking about, in changing the Bitcoin price from, US dollars per Bitcoin to sats per US dollar, to trying to tap into that unit bias. Because even if you know that it's divisible, if you're really new to this space, the fact that a whole coin is largely out of reach for most people, is unfortunately discouraging. It shouldn't be, right? And it's wonderful savings technology. But again, if you're not deep down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, you're still kind of living in fiat. You're still thinking about like you want that like $1,000 in $1 million return. That's why shit coins are going to go on the rise again, and they already are. Sure. And it's hard to communicate to somebody like even how powerful, even just call it like 30% compounded annual growth rate. Like that's amazing, and what you can do with that is fantastic. But most people think about it's like, okay, so my $1,000 is now 1,300. My life hasn't greatly improved because they're still thinking shorter time frame. And so in terms of like the price action, I'm surprised that 100K hasn't brought more people in. I do see the argument about unit bias. And then the other thing that James pointed out that I do think has some credence to it was that there was a lot of people, I think, that were burned last cycle. So last cycle, we had like the NFL ads and the stadiums named after crypto.com.
Yep.
And I think I know people personally who had funds on FTX, right? I didn't know they had funds at the time. They told me after the fact. I would have expressly warned them. But even if I would have, they probably would have ignored me, right? There was a lot of hype going on. And I think a lot of people really got burned by the last cycle. I think even most Bitcoiners were calling for 100K the last cycle. I know that I certainly was, right? I idiotically felt like that was in the bag. Like we were going to get much closer than we necessarily did. And so to take a silly analogy, I almost think of it like electric vehicles. And I'm wondering if he might be right, and this might be the case, where in terms of the market for electric vehicles, which I don't personally like, but that's just me, everybody who was probably the target demographic, who is interested, who it works in their climate conditions, their lifestyle, they probably already have one. Right. And so if we just, I'm making up numbers, but if EV adoption is something like 10%, they're like, we're going to get the other 90. It's like the other 90 have been aware of this product for a long time. They're probably not interested in it. And anybody who would be interested probably already has got on board. And so I wonder if for this cycle in particular, if the uninformed retail that would be interested probably was interested in 2021. And if they got burned, they might not be coming back. There might not be a new primed retail market that gets into this space.
Fair.
It may be more that like Bitcoin exposure for the next kind of wave either comes from a major pain point, like where you need the infrastructure, the censorship resistance, you need that ability to not be debased and to get out of the fiat system, or even it might just be Bitcoin exposure through passive flows because you've got, the QQQ and Sailor is now part in MicroStrategy is now part of the NASDAQ. Like it's very possible we may have already burnt up the possibly curious, not yet informed retail the last time around. I'm curious what your thoughts are, Gary.
I think that could be the case. I think I might have been listening to the Spaces as well. I listen to so many different podcasts. I listen to Spaces from time to time, like when I'm not picking up my kids from school. And I might have heard it there. I might have heard it someplace else. Somebody who gets burned, it's going to be hard for that person to want to come back. I tried to put myself in those shoes. If I were in the situation and I lost a bunch of money, even if you sat down and explained to me logically, like, okay, well, you lost that money because you had a third party holding it and it wasn't Bitcoin's fault. It was this person's fault. And, if you get in, you secure your own keys, it'll be different. I'm like, yeah, my brain says, yeah, I get your point. You're right. But on the other hand, my emotions are like, oh God, I lost all the money. I don't want to do that again. So no, wrong. So I think you're right. I'm sure there's part of that. I think you probably have a point where the people who wanted to get in were probably going to get in last cycle. On the other hand, I don't know. I can only speak to my own personal experience. Like I told you before, I have, an accountant my dad uses who I told about Bitcoin to for years. And I was trying to get him to get in at like, I don't know, 20, 30, somewhere around there. And now he came to me and it's over 100,000. He wants to buy like a whole coin. I'm like, I'll help you do it. I'll help you figure it out. I'm happy to do it. But, it's crazy how, it's just the psychology is so interesting. So the price of this is higher now. Therefore, I want to buy it. Name another good or service where you encounter that. I mean, I'm sure it happens from time to time, but it
gas went up odd. 10x. I got to fill the tank.
Exactly. It seems a little bit weird, but I guess if you think it's just going to keep going up from here. And I told him, I said, listen, yeah, you have to understand, and he claims he understands this already, that if these cycles continue on, let's say it even goes to 200K, which in my mind, I think is very bullish, but I think you have.
You bear.
I know you have a higher prediction than I do, but let's go with my very conservative prediction where like that's the blown off the top 200K where that's insane. I can't even imagine it. There could be a pullback, and previous pullbacks have been 60, 70, close to 80%. I mean, you could be, if previous trends follow, you could be pulling back to 50, 60K somewhere in like 2026. Now, are the fundamentals of the market different if you have all these countries jumping in for, strategic Bitcoin reserves? Does that change the nature of the pullback? I don't know. Maybe, I suppose. But I tried to warn him. I'm like, listen, you might be able to get it cheaper if you just wait another year or so. But then again, you're going to be losing money or putting your money elsewhere. And I should be the last person to talk about trying to play this cute. As I said, it was at 16 something. I'm like, it's going to go down to 13.5. I'll wait.
Hold off on this one.
Exactly. Yeah. And then I'm the idiot. So who knows?
No, but you bring up a very interesting point there about price drives attention, and it's one of those kind of like reverse effects where the higher the Bitcoin price is, the more people tend to pile into it, right? Which again, it's they're gonna buy high and sell low, especially if they don't understand what it is they're holding, why it's so valuable, and why it's important. And to that point too, again, like another friend who I've been telling him explicitly, and we joke about it for like the last 2 years, and I can't get him to buy. But he wants to do like some in his garage heating and mine for it. But it's like, that's good. That's fun, right? It's a nice little hobby project, get the extra heat from it. But like, if we've been talking about this consistently, if you would just put a little bit, if you would have put enough for the heater in back in June, the heater would be free now.
Yeah.
Right. But I just can't get him to make that step, that leap. And going back to fun price predictions, and we'll talk about that. Now, again, as everyone knows, this is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. I am an idiot when it comes to these things, but I find it fun and fascinating. And I do think your 200K is bearish. The other reason too is that if I'm wrong, or if we're wrong about retail will show up when price does big moves up. And they will push that price and the euphoria higher as well, too. And James made this point yesterday as well, too, is that big money is stupid as well. And so even I could very much so see a case for the blow off top. For me, I feel like the blow off top very well could be a black swan event, something geopolitical or an exchange blowing up. Maybe Coinbase will be finally taken out to the wood chipper and, put aside. But what I more or less expect is that we're going to see unbelievable leverage and euphoria in the space again. And so in order for there to be euphoria and a lot of dumb money moving around, I would expect, say, like the rise to 200K to actually be what pulls people back into the space. And then they're panicking 10 to 1, 100 to 1 leverage, trying to make up for it, then push the price even higher, only then to come down and just see the cascading liquidations and the panic selling. Like I could almost see like your 200K not being the blow off top. Because don't forget too, we're moving in. If you look at it on either log scale, or just think about it in percentage term, like 100K to 200K is only a doubling from here. It's just like 2x from here. And on the previous cycles going into the following year, a 2x, like 100% gain, is pretty small for Bitcoin historically termed. Now, it could be diminishing returns, but that's in my mind pretty small. Whereas like the previous one, I think we got like roughly the 3x, right?
We got the 3x from its like previous cycle high of 20,000, went up to 69. But I think going from, I don't know if you're saying the next year, but going from like December of 2020 to like January 2021 and like in through that year, weren't we already like around 35 or 40 heading into January? Maybe I'm remembering it wrong.
It's possible. I'd have to pull it up. I think we were in the 20s.
Okay.
I know we were in the 12s because it was right around my daughter's birthday, and like first birthday, like she showed up. What was the Bitcoin price when daughter was born? And it was around the 12. So it started to run at the end of the year.
I'm going to take your word for it.
It very well could have been 30s in January, but it started to run around that point and then go up. But
gotcha.
Kind of what I'm anticipating is the move from like, we'll just start grinding up. I know that I've heard some people talk about like 120. There's a lot of sell orders hanging out around there. Okay. But I almost anticipate to see it continue to grind higher at the beginning of the year, drawdowns and stuff along the way.
Sure.
And I'm almost waiting to see if we have another inflection point, which causes that kind of euphoria moment. Like maybe let's say we get to like 180K and people just start piling in with the leverage, where we get that almost like rapid rise up and then blow off and liquidate down and panic selling out. I would almost find like if it was only to do 200, it would almost be like a rounding top. But maybe the cycles are done. Maybe retail and euphoria doesn't show up. But greed is a hell of a drug. And so I'm going to in no way actually bet on it being much higher than what you're calling for, and then having a good old correction back down. Speaking of price predictions, I think you said there was something from Saylor recently.
Yeah, it's not terribly recently, but I think for a few months now he's made that 13 million per Bitcoin by the year 2045. That's based on his math, his charts, and I think he has said that is his like mid-level prediction. I think his like base prediction, like the low end was like 3 million and like the high end was in like the 40s or something. And that's his mid-level prediction based on his math. And I mean, who knows? I don't know what the world's going to be like in 20 years, but it did make me wonder, okay, let's say he's right. It's going to be 13 million in 2045. My question is, how much is 13 million worth in 2045?
Now, for anyone who's not aware, this is very much like a cooking show where some of these things are planned in ahead of time. So I am not going to do the math on the fly. I already had it ready. And if I account for 7% inflation, kind of taking like an average global inflation rate, just slightly arbitrary, but at an inflation rate of 7%, that 13 million is about 3 million in today's purchasing power, which to me, that seems like very reasonable. But now I'm not sure if Saylor's doing any of the sort of inflation adjustment, if he's just talking in like today's dollars purchasing power. But in 2045, if we were only sitting at 3 million, I would be kind of surprised. And I'll do some quick math on the fly. We're sitting at about...
Oh, so you're doing it anyway.
I'm going to do it anyways. Okay, I'm going to try and do it anyway. So 13 million, we're sitting at... Okay, get it ready. We're currently... It's easy math. We're about 2 trillion at about 100K. So then at 13 million, that would be a 130x. Am I doing that right? Yeah, it'd be about 130x on top of 2 trillion. So that would be $260 trillion. Okay, seems pretty reasonable compared to today's real estate and bond market. I could see in credit markets, like I could absolutely see Bitcoin being a $260 trillion market cap asset class.
Thank you for clarifying market cap and not 260 trillion per coin. I appreciate that.
That's when it's just utter failure of every fiat currency. But I think I've heard some estimates about like total global asset values somewhere, including credit, is like 900 trillion or 600 trillion. So that seems very reasonable if it became like a major portion of collateral and just a major asset for storing value throughout the entire world. But again, the other thing too is that we're going to pile on more debt. So that's a large chunk of today's total value. But in 20 years, at 20 years, we're going to hit a quadrillion, right? Like a quadrillion or whatever it is. Like we're going to move. I know it's numbers that are so stupid. They're kind of useless.
Yeah, I can't even fathom what that means. No. I can't even fathom what a trillion or a billion means. That's like beyond my ability to comprehend. So.
Yeah. It absolutely is. It's numbers at scales that are completely ridiculous. And you got to wonder if even comparing it to the dollar at that point has any value, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like even for me, again, going back to like, I look at things that I find interesting, but I will do nothing about them. I like watching Bitcoin versus WTI versus energy costs, just using oil as like a proxy for energy. And I think that like Bitcoin versus even like Peter Schiff's gold, right, will have some better comparison point in terms of value, or using it to price a home or price oil and gas. I think that's where things make sense. But 13 million, 2045 seems reasonable to me. Yeah, I'll be able to buy a lot of things at the SAT market, which we just had recently, which is delightful. I will have so much beef jerky.
Can you tell everybody about the sat market?
Oh yeah, awesome. So I think it was Sunday, December 15th, if I'm not mistaken, we just had the local sat market in Calgary, and this thing is growing and is absolutely fantastic. So Ben is putting it on with his wonderful team of volunteers. Shout out to Art and everybody that makes it happen. And it's a biannual get together of Bitcoins and merchants, and it's a cash and Bitcoin only little farmers market. And the nice thing is that it's really starting to grow and get a little bit of attention outside of Calgary. People are talking about how we've had people flying in from across the country to come and attend this and hang out, as well as like we went to the YYC Bitcoin meetup Christmas party, which was absolutely delightful. Wife was driving. I got to Taiwan on and just rant for hours. It was great. But I think like I'm hopeful that in the next coming year, we'll hopefully get some people flying internationally to come check this out. And I think it's almost reached the critical mass. I think there was over 40 vendors there, where I expect the next couple rounds that we're going to start to get vendors who aren't Bitcoiners. So people that are already doing like the farmers market circuit, who are like, I want to come and I want to sell my stuff there, and will be willing to learn at least enough to get a little hot wallet set up so that they can sell Bitcoin. Sorry, they could sell if they want to. So they can receive Bitcoin and receive cash easily and sell their stuff. And I think that really hits the next kind of momentum point when non-Bitcoiners want to participate in the Bitcoin market. And from a self-sovereign standpoint, from that kind of like resilience, like we often talk about the, securing your keys and cold storage and keeping them offline and all this fun stuff as well too. And then you got to start to think about like operational security, the OPSEC and the $5 wrench attack. But the other part of like the anti-censorship part of Bitcoin is having people that that will receive it, right?
Sure.
So the ability for me to go to these vendors and buy meat and eggs, and I got some amazing like ground mustard and pickles and stuff too. The ability to go and buy the things that I need without having to use an exchange or in a service to convert it back into fiat to exchange is unbelievably powerful. If I could find a gas station that would accept Bitcoin directly, I think like any worst case scenario, I'm covered. I can get food, I can get fuel. I should be reasonably good, right? You can kind of build up the essentials, and it's almost like having I always keep some water on hand in the garage, right? Building out these networks is kind of like that preparedness for whatever may come down the road. No one can take your Bitcoin, and you can still buy beef.
Yeah, that's the key. I just need beef, just some beef, and I'm good. Yeah, the gas and water, that's secondary.
Exactly.
Very good, man. Yeah. So cool. It sounds great.
It's been absolutely wonderful. I love participating in these things. And like we've talked before too, being around Bitcoiners is, I used to describe it as incredibly energizing, but it's not. It's incredibly easy in the sense that like I'm in a room full of people that I haven't necessarily met everybody yet, but I don't have to worry about filtering what I'm saying, censoring what I'm saying. I can just relax, be myself, and it feels great. I imagine the Jersey City meetup is much the same.
It's very similar. Now, that said, there will come a day where enough quote unquote normies get in where you got to wonder, oh, these aren't all necessarily people who philosophically think like me anymore. These are just other people who happen to use Bitcoin as people use dollars and water, and it's just a thing we do. And are you looking forward to that day where, there might be people who don't jive with what you're putting out, who also are on Bitcoin?
I think it's a much more of a Trojan horse than maybe even like we give it credit. It's a little mind virus, but it's a positive little white hat mind virus that if you're coming into Bitcoin, you can't escape the voluntarism of it, that exchanges must be peaceful and voluntary. You can't force and take my Bitcoin. And if you're building on that, go back to fix the money, fix the world. Sure. If you're building off of that framework, sure, we might have some little back and forth in these things too. But even let's say I don't politically align with the newcomers coming into the space, it's fine. It's 100% fine at the end of the day, because if we go full on Bitcoin standard, you can't force me to pay for it. So we might disagree on the best outcome, but you have to leave it with the respectful agree to disagree, because you can only get voluntary participation. And I think that leaks into everything, right?
I think very well could be the case. I was probably going to follow up and ask you about that, but I think you make a great point there. Like how much, do people still have these very divergent views in the future? Do more and more people embrace even just basic ideas of low time preference, honest exchange, integrity, that sort of thing? I hope I hope it's what we all hope for.
Right?
I think
It's like even going back to like the ANCAP days. Like I who was it? Was it? I think he runs the Soho Forum in New York. I remember the first time I heard this. It was in a debate between I think like ANCAP and communism, and the point was that like even in like a full Bitcoin society, even if we went to a full wonderful ANCAP society, the kind of idea maximum voluntarism that we could have, there's no reason you couldn't have communism. You can have both as long as it's voluntary, right?
Yes.
Like if you're like, we need socialized healthcare systems, like great, start it, have your little area. If it's voluntary opt-in, then absolutely go for it. At that point, you're just an insurance company, but still, it doesn't matter. If you want to have a full-on commune in Ancampistan, you can, long as participation and exit is completely voluntary.
I like how you just identified it as you're just basically doing insurance. That reminds me of that great South Park episode where all the hippies come in and the guy's like, no, you don't understand. We like want to form a community where there's like a guy who bakes bread for everybody and then another guy who protects the guy that bakes bread. You mean a baker and a cop? You just haven't been to college yet, man. You don't get it.
Yes. It's like if only there was some way we could just specialize and then exchange our goods and services. Like, yeah. And Bitcoin is how you'll do it. That's how you'll organize. It's funny because when you drill down to it, like the complexities of our political system, which Canada is a shit show. So much fun to watch right now. Our finance minister quit. Everybody's freaking out.
It's all relative shit shows, man. It's just some days one's worse than the others. Whatever. Find me a government that's not a shit show.
Any sort of system that requires force in order to perpetuate it is unsustainable. It will eventually degrade and fall apart. But even going back, like we're gonna have different people coming into the space, and how are they gonna deal, and what will it be like? It's like almost like it is. I was gonna say it's not a gotcha question. It is a gotcha question. Everybody that I talk to, it's like, okay, can we agree that we're not going to hit people? Same rules for the kids. And we're not going to take each other's stuff. I'm like, oh, yeah, absolutely. It's like, okay, let's just do that. I'm not going to pay for your weird tax bill. Oh, no, you have to. Don't hit me.
Yeah,
can't take my stuff.
Exactly. Well, I mean, not to get. I mean, it seems we do this a lot. I'm fine with it because I'm kind of philosophical and political, but you and I align. And again, I want to say this repeatedly: Bitcoin is for everybody. You don't have to think like Nathan and I to be into Bitcoin. We welcome everybody. Bitcoin's for everyone. But we see this all the time where people make these arguments that taxes are the price we pay for civilized society. Taxes aren't theft. And they give all these reasons why it's not theft. And I come back to the basics. Like, did you take something from someone? Yes. No. Were they voluntarily willing to give it to you? No. Okay. That's theft.
Yeah.
Now, you might have an argument to explain or justify why theft in that particular case is necessary or justified.
It's usually utilitarianism, right?
Yeah.
Like the ends justify the means. Like,
yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I don't know if you're going to be right, but I'm willing to hear that argument from you. Like you acknowledge that it's theft, but in this case, it's just necessary for the greater good or whatever. Make that argument you want, but don't sit here and tell me that taking something from somebody when they didn't voluntarily give it to you is not theft. It's theft. It's theft.
And even to that point, it's funny because most people, almost all of your daily interactions are, except for the ones with the state, are voluntary and peaceful. I know that people have like a lot, not necessarily, but I do find a lot of people have kind of a very nihilistic or negative view of like human nature. But confrontation is risky and expensive. Like almost all mammals will avoid confrontation if possible because of the chance you could get hurt, damage, these things as well. It makes sense, right? Most people are not peacefully going into the baker and giving their money for a cake and not just running in and taking it because there's a chance they could go to prison for it, right? Mm-hmm. Most people by their very nature are voluntarily exchanging and happy to do so, and most interactions are peaceful. You didn't need a law to tell you not to steal the cake. It wasn't necessary.
Yeah.
And I think as much as, Bitcoin is for everyone. Bitcoin is for enemies, and everyone is welcome. And I think the Bitcoin view is a very optimistic one in terms of human cooperation and the general state of being, in that it's when we're in these artificial, negatively incentivizing situations, artificially created scarcity through malinvestment in these things as well too, that we have result in conflict, and we result in greater disparities and issues that even if we disagree, I think if we were on more of a voluntary standard, I think it would ultimately result in a more peaceful and a more optimistic future, right? Like even just think about housing, right? Yeah. There's no reason that there's no reason that people should necessarily be struggling for just basic accommodations and need. And I get it. If you don't have food, if you don't have shelter, you would be more inclined to confrontational situations because your basic needs aren't met. And so the risk reward balance changes, right?
Sure.
But it's only, particularly in Canada, it's only an artificial construction of the regulation, the red tape, the financing of why housing costs so much. I mean, money printing, right? Houses on a Bitcoin standard houses should be getting cheaper and better, as all things, as entrepreneurs move to improve and find productivity gains. This is all Jeff Booth stuff, and even Preston Pish has directly pointed out that things are getting cheaper in Bitcoin prices.
I mean, this is Adam Smith stuff.
Exactly. Know? Yes. Yeah. There's no reason throwing up wood constructions should be more expensive now with technology than it was years ago. That's ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
And so I agree. It's not for everyone, but I'm just very optimistic that as we continue down this path, it's going to be better for everyone, regardless if you agree with me or not.
I mean, I think you're right. And again, you and I we're so similar philosophically. We got to have somebody on at some point who's going to
disagree with us.
To disagree with us. But I'm going to take a bit of a turn here. It's something that I noticed because we are so similar philosophically, and it made me wonder. We probably saw earlier this week. Some people listening to it may have seen that Google came out with this quantum computing.
Yeah.
Google quantum computing. Now, what little I know about quantum computing means that you can do multiple operations at the same time with the same electrons. I already feel dumb trying to explain this.
You and me both.
It's well beyond my pay grade. But the idea, the end result is that you'd be able to solve problems exponentially faster than any traditional computer. And apparently, there's all the usual talk now. Well, there's quantum computing. We're going to crack Bitcoin cryptography and so on and so forth. And, we should begin by saying that if someday quantum computing could crack Bitcoin cryptography, I think Bitcoin, there'll be a whole lot of other places to worry about beyond just Bitcoin. Yeah. Banks, companies,
telecommunications, internet, the entire
nuclear weapon silos. Yes, these are big time things. So I think Bitcoin is going to be probably one of the least of your worries if quantum computing can start cracking cryptography all over the place. So that part I kind of get from just a logical perspective, but the details, I think I was listening to Natalie Brunell this morning, and she was talking about how Mara, formerly Marathon Mining, they put out kind of an explainer article talking about how even quantum computing currently, it's nowhere near what you need to crack it. Yeah. And she mentioned how quantum computing currently operates at 100 qubits. And this new quantum computer put out by Google called Willow operates at 105. And you would actually need 317 million qubits to break the cryptography underlying Bitcoin's protocol. Now, I don't know what a qubit is. I mean, I know Qbert. I had a Qbert birthday party. It was great. I was a big fan of the video game growing up, but I have no clue what qubits are. It sounded really smart to me, but then it got me thinking, we talk a lot in Bitcoin about don't trust, verify. And I think that's kind of a great ethos, or even just a rule of thumb to live under beyond just Bitcoin. It's a good thing to try to do in life when you are capable of doing it, when time and energy allow you to do it. And as much as I try to do that, as much as I try to read as much as I can and listen to as much as I can and really kind of grasp what it is that I've invested my money into, at the end of the day, I'm putting a lot of trust in other people who I am trusting to be wiser, more intelligent, have integrity, to believe what they're saying. And it got me thinking, how much of this is just based on the fact that there are people who often advocate Bitcoin who share my philosophical and political sensibilities. Like if this were, Paul Krugman or Elizabeth Warren advocating Bitcoin, would I be as all in? Like, well, I mean, there's a lot that I don't understand. And these people who have a really poor track record are saying this is good. Is this something that I want to be involved in? I don't know. It just makes me wonder, like, as much as we say, don't trust, verify, everybody to some degree is trusting to some degree here. And how much does that play into how into it we are? I know I've given you a whole lot. I vomited a lot at you, but give me any thoughts you have.
You have to trust. There's no way to get around it. There's going to be some aspect, because we cannot be an expert in everything. There's always limitations to our knowledge and what we can do. And you're right, Bitcoin is don't trust, verify, and the source code and everything is there and open and available to go through. But how many people can actually go through the source code and actually verify for themselves?
I can't.
I can do a little bit. I cannot do the entirety of it. I can poke around there a little bit, and I have some programming understanding and training. So I can go through a little bit, and I'll look for particular sections that I'm interested in, because I'm also just curious in how they're operating. But it is impossible in a market economy, because the market economy, of course, we're building up on the skill sets of others, right? We're specializing because we can't specialize in everything, right? Like I'm playing with this little pen right here. That piece just fell off because I was playing with it. I
don't know if that's supposed to be symbolic of anything, but continue.
I couldn't build this from scratch, right? I have no idea how to refine the metals. I have no idea how to like press it and what the ink is even necessarily made of.
Forget a pen. You couldn't build a pencil from scratch.
Damn straight. I pencil. It's a wonderful essay on the subject itself. And so with that, regarding the quantum, you want to dive into it as much as you can. And then also you're going to have to play off some heuristics and ideas that you can kind of work with that don't require necessarily parsing through it. Because even your operating system, right? Like how many people are going to be able to go through and verify that the compiler that they're using for compiling code is correct? Or
I don't even know what a compiler is.
There you go, right? Or like how many people are going to be able to verify their Linux or their Mac OS or their Windows operating system or whatever they might be using. You're at some point in time, you're going to be building using, or trusted, like even like the keyboard isn't doing something, right? At some point in time, some component or some aspect was going to be built by somebody else. And there are ways that you might be able to verify or double check, but you're going to have trust built in there as well too. There's no way of getting around it, because you cannot do everything that's necessary on your own. And so going back to like, how do I think about quantum and what's coming up here as well too, is one, for me, this is just a heuristic. It sets off some red flags in the sense that we've heard this many times before as like the great risk. And I agree. It's like a lot of other things, including like Google and Microsoft, they would break their entire infrastructure if they actually pulled this off. That a lot of other things will break first. All right, what else can I lean on to kind of like let me know where things are going? Number one is Satoshi's coins, right? If those still haven't moved, that is a giant honeypot that is testing the resilience of the network. If we see those moves, that's cause for concern, and we should try to understand what's happened there or why. Could be a legitimate signing, but it's worth looking into.
And can you explain to the audience, because I sort of understand why that would be a concern, but can you explain why that would be sort of a canary in the coal mine?
Oh, absolutely. It's basically like bait money behind glass, right? Everybody can see this 1.1 million Bitcoin just sitting there that's never moved. And so if you had the ability to crack the Bitcoin, the SHA-256 algorithm, crack the elliptic curve cryptography, and actually sign a transaction for those funds and move them for your own benefit, that's likely where the attack's going to go, right? It's the biggest pile of cash sitting there in plain sight. If there's a vulnerability, you would expect somebody to go after that. So we kind of have that canary in the coal mine aspect as well, too. Going back to the kind of red flag thing, is that like it's like with AI, we don't have AI. We have large language models. It's very powerful. It's a very great tool, but it's not intelligence. And so this very much so feels like VC hype and trying to get things going. And I feel like it will fade away into the background as well too. And then the other one that does touch more on the don't trust, verify is that Bitcoin is an open source software that we all voluntarily choose to participate in and run. So, and I think Satoshi in the original kind of forum post referenced this. If let's just go down the hypotheticals, because it's money that's just code. Let's say quantum computing breaks the cryptography. What do? Well, we hard fork. Right? It would be very easy to get consensus into forking the chain to a new consensus algorithm, a new cryptography solution that's something that's quantum resistant. Mm-hmm. We fork the chain and we continue from there. Because at that point in time, getting the node operators like ourselves to just update the software, we would voluntarily do that. Mm-hmm. Right? It'd be very easy to get social consensus on, like if we said like, block 1 million. After block 1 million, they broke the cryptography. So, okay, everybody, we're picking up from block 1 million and we're forking onto this new rule set, right? It's just an upgrade and go. Nothing's been lost. No one's taken. That fork chain with the quantum broken, nobody would use it. It would die off and we would just continue on as need be. We have
it sounds like you're being in a band in a recording studio. Like, yeah, we're all right. We messed up. We're just going to pick it from the second stanza and just continue on. And
that's exactly it. We're just going to punch in. That's it, right? Yeah. Oh, no, we had a big error over here. We're just going to rewind the tape and we're going to punch you in. Now, everybody continue. This code is something that the great developers out there will maintain and make updates to it as we go along time. And this very easily would just be another update. And of course, if the world is storing their monetary value there, the world is going to go like, yeah, let's continue with the rule set and go this way. It would not. It's not necessarily all that difficult. Bitcoin is resilient in the fact that it is very difficult to change, but it's also possible to change.
Now, you mentioned Satoshi's coins, and I listened to a podcast about this a few weeks back, and maybe you can better explain it to me, because the idea of it being the canary in a coal mine, yes, of course, it's that big honeypot sitting there, but somebody else mentioned, and you might be able to better clarify this, that part of the reason why it one day could be cracked, Satoshi's coins, is because if by some chance Satoshi, whoever that may be, or whatever that may be, is no longer with us, those coins are just going to sit there for years, decades, a century longer. And I guess the wallet that it's in has not been updated or changed. And it would still be, I guess, under the old protocol. If I'm not using these words correctly, tell me, but that would be the easiest one out of everything to crack because it hasn't been updated.
No, you're correct. And I forget what it is. It's even beyond my scope. I remember I was listening, I think, to Wicked talking about this, but it's something to do with the way that the transactions were signed and the addresses in the beginning of what they were using, something to do with legacy there, that they are more vulnerable than like the SegWit and the systems that we're using now. So you're correct. I think it has to do with the site, because it's like pay to key hash. It's something about like the first iterations of the kind of wallet configurations that are more vulnerable than the ones that we're using now. So you are right on that. That not only is it the giant honeypot, but I think it'd be technically easier to brute force.
Okay. Cool. Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have a couple of things that I wanted to talk about, but is there anything on your plate?
No, let's nail those ones out and then we'll call it for today.
Yeah, I don't. Well, I want to talk NOSTR. We probably don't have time to really get into NOSTR. We only have like 5-10 minutes left. But, here in the United States, we're talking about, quote unquote, banning TikTok unless.
Oh, is that a thing still? I thought that disappeared.
No, that's a thing. In fact, it's going to the Supreme Court this coming month. They're going to hear the case because the lower court said, yeah, you can pass this bill to ban TikTok. The bill basically said the Chinese company that owns TikTok has to sell to an American company, or America's going to ban it. We can get into all the reasons of the different people that have been pushing it for different reasons. I'm not going to get into the politics of it right now. But the idea is like you can just shut this down, the central media. And of course, the whole idea behind NOSTR is that it is completely decentralized. If you shut down one client, whether that is Damus or Primal or any of the others, there's a bunch of others that can take its place, and NOSTR goes on. There's no real central choke point to get at it, much like the idea of Bitcoin. So that'd be kind of cool. And I say this as somebody, I've never used TikTok in my life. I have no interest in using TikTok, but I would think philosophically people should be free to use it if they want to. And if they don't want to, they don't have to. So what I've heard about NOSTR is that, again, it's great. It's decentralized. You can't get at it. But all I really understand about NOSTR so far, aside from being able to zap people, is that it's more or less a decentralized Twitter. And yet I hear from people that it has the potential to be so much more than that. Can you expound upon this at all? And if not, that's fine.
I can a little bit. And funny enough, I was on Canadian Bitcoiners podcast with Pablo there, and we both got called out for not being on NOSTR enough. I had like the individual account, but I was like, okay, I got to move the Bitcoin Mentor one over there, and Pablo's going to do the same. We promised to hold each other accountable and make it happen before the end of January. I just didn't want another platform that I had to post things to be honest. But to the questions about it. So I actually think that like the Twitter use case is probably one of the least interesting ones, but it's still there. And I think that's why perhaps there's not necessarily going to be a lot of uptake outside of it. So the big benefit being that with using private and public keys, you can take your entire profile with you. I don't know if it will happen, but like using NOSTR on the existing social media platforms, like plugging into it, really does make sense. But for me, I don't know if it necessarily just eats into their current profit models, right? Essentially being that like you'd have your private key, which is associated with your account, and you're signing, broadcasting notes and going through the relays. But like, so that your Twitter, your Facebook, your Google, it's all just associated with your public key information there. And so that even if you were banned off Twitter, you can still take all those and go to the next one. Your network that you created stays with you, right?
Yep.
And that feels really powerful, but I guess it does eat into the walled gardens of the current system. I like that. I know that Fetty is using NOSTR for identity. They're using Matrix for chat and NOSTR, I believe, for identity on there. And I do think there is a lot of powerful opportunities using this protocol. And I'm not sure if just like posting tweets essentially is the best use case. But
this is what I ate for breakfast.
Yeah, but there is something there. Now, the censorship resistant one, I think it's an important tool to have for libertarians, Bitcoiners, freedom-oriented people to be aware of and be there. But I don't think the general public will necessarily show up because they're not necessarily concerned yet with their privacy or censorship, right? And that's just it's just Visa's easy, right? That's why people use it and will maybe push off Bitcoin for a while. Same sort of thing with NOSTR. It's not overly difficult, but it's not a 10 times better experience to get you to change your behavior. However, I do think it is very powerful in terms of identity and keeping information like with your account and moving from platform to platform. So in the same way that I expect Bitcoin to be integrated in more digital platforms going down the line, I expect NOSTR to be integrated more. I know that Alex Svetsky with, Setlantis was doing a lot of stuff over NOSTR, and I think he still is. I know there's some difficulty because there's not really consensus on what the protocol rules are. So I think there's still some kinks that have to be worked out there in terms of like the way it was described to me. I don't know if it's accurate. It was kind of like, we're TCP IP. Like the protocols for NOSTR aren't necessarily all agreed upon. TCP IP. I was referring to the protocols that we use for internet communication. That those are just kind of those are agreed upon. Everyone's building on those. Voluntary, by the way, and it's all happening as well too. Same with the Bitcoin protocols. Agreed upon protocol, we're all building on it. My understanding is that it's not quite the same for NOSTR yet, or maybe not completely, but I could have that wrong, making developing on it kind of hard because different platforms might not be using different aspects, or not really sure how it works out. But I know that one thing that, funny enough, that I need to worth mentioning here as well too is that as we continue to build on NOSTR, and I will be over there soon, I promise. Even Bitcoiners have not been very conscientious about like just copying and pasting their private keys over, because those are private keys very much in the same of Bitcoin private keys. And so if you're treating those with a very lax environment, let's say you get a big following on NOSTR, but you put it into your Google Drive, there's a good chance that somebody could hijack your account at some point in time, right? Because even it's basically a dead account now, but when I first started, I was just copying and pasting. I'll move from Primal, I'm going to move it over here. And then looking back, I was like, I just treated that private key like it was Gary's email and tossed it around every computer possible. It's like that was not necessarily a good idea. So I think some of the security aspects of NOSTR, and I think Coldcard already can in the secure notes, but I think we'll start to see better security for the NOSTR private keys. I think we'll continue to see developers integrate it, particularly for like identification purposes. I think is really useful. And it's got the fail-safe of the censorship resistant, which if for nothing else, people should play around with it, try it out. You might love the Bitcoin community hanging out there. It might be wonderful. But it's one of those things that you want to at least be aware of, even like Bitcoin privacy tech, right? You don't necessarily have to use a coin join for everything, but you should be aware of it, right? You might want to at least, touch on something like the Bull app or Aqua Wallet, where you can use Liquid Bitcoin and Lightning, because that offers you a little bit of privacy and things as well there too. Again, it doesn't have to be your daily driver. Don't have to use it all the time, but be aware of it so that if you needed to, you're not panicking to try and figure these things out. In the same way that you should recover your Bitcoin wallet from the seed words before you actually have to do a practice recovery on a hardware device, you should sign up for NOSTR. You should maybe get the Bull app, get Aqua Wallet, maybe download Wasabi Wallet. you don't have to be an expert in these things. You just want to be a little bit aware and prepared in the same way, throwback to earlier, that find somebody who will sell you beef and eggs for Bitcoin so that when the grocery store says, nope, you are over your carbon allotment, you're still good. I think that's it for today. It's been wonderful chatting as always, Gary. I love our little talks. It's been too long since the last one. We're going to have to make these a little more regular and more scheduled going forward.
Thank you so much for tuning in. You don't have to, but if it's not too inconvenient, a like, a share, or a subscribe is hugely appreciated. If you'd like to learn more about Bitcoin Mentor education and consulting services, head on over to bitcoinmentor.io to book a free discovery call.